Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive deep into a career path that I bet you haven't thought much about. Today we're tackling podiatry. And no, before you tune out thinking it's all about smell of feet and bunions, we're going way beyond that. Seriously, if you're even slightly interested in what podiatrists really do, stick around. Whether you're considering this as a career yourself, prepping for an interview, or just, curious about this whole world of foot health. We've got some awesome resources from RoleCatcher to guide us, and let me tell you, this profession is way more interesting than most people realize. For example, did you know that some podiatrists use CAD/CAM systems? We're talking custom-designed orthotics. Like, imagine they create them right there in the office using 3D imaging. That's pretty high-tech for something we usually associate with, well, just feet. And get this, and this one really blew my mind. The RoleCatcher guide mentions that some podiatrists even specialize in forensics. Apparently, our feet are almost as unique as fingerprints, so they can actually analyze footprints at crime scenes to, help solve crimes. Wild, right? To help break it all down, I've got an expert joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's always exciting to talk about podiatry, especially when people are already so intrigued.
Well, you have to admit, the stuff in this RoleCatcher guide is pretty attention-grabbing. I mean, forensic podiatry. Who knew? It definitely seems like there's a lot more to this field than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. It's a field that requires both, deep medical knowledge and a real passion for biomechanics.
Yeah.
We're constantly learning about how the foot interacts with the entire body and how we can help people of all ages and lifestyles optimize their foot function.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of different lifestyles and all, it seems like a career with a ton of variety. The guide mentioned that the job outlook for podiatry is excellent, like projected to grow much faster than average, which is pretty appealing these days.
You're right. Job security is definitely a big plus. But beyond that, I think the field itself offers so many different avenues. Some podiatrists might focus on specific conditions like sports injuries or diabetic foot care, while others might specialize in areas like surgery or biomechanics.
Wow, so many options. The guide actually breaks down the podiatry career path into these stages, almost like a role-playing game, which I kind of love. It starts with an entry-level position, which makes sense. But I'm curious, what does an entry-level podiatrist actually do day to day?
So starting out, you'd be working really closely with more experienced podiatrists,
Hmm.
really getting a feel for the day-to-day flow of things. Think of it like a hands-on learning experience where you're shadowing, assisting with patient assessments, taking medical histories, and performing those initial physical exams,
Hmm.
really learning the ropes.
Soaking it all up.
Exactly.
Think a sponge.
It really is, especially at the beginning. And you know what I'd say? I think one of the biggest things that new podiatrists have to get used to is really learning how to apply all that theoretical knowledge they got from their textbooks, in school, to actual, real-life patients. It's one thing to read about a condition in a book, but it's a whole other thing to actually see it firsthand and then have to figure out the best way to treat it.
Yeah, I can imagine that takes some getting used to. So how do those responsibilities change then as you kind of move up the ladder, like from entry level to, let's say, a junior podiatrist? What does that next level look like?
So as you become more comfortable, more confident in your abilities, you get to start being a little bit more independent. You'll start diagnosing and treating some of those more common foot and lower limb conditions on your own. For example, you might see a patient who comes in with plantar fasciitis, which is a really common cause of heel pain.
Okay, now you're going to have to explain that one for those of us who didn't go to podiatry school. What exactly is plantar fasciitis?
Right, of course. So basically, it's inflammation of this thick band of tissue that runs along the bottom of your foot. It connects your heel to your toes, and it can cause this stabbing pain, especially in the morning or after you've been sitting or standing for a long time.
Ouch, that sounds pretty unpleasant.
Yeah, it's no walk in the park, that's for sure. But the good news is podiatrists have a bunch of different treatments for it. Things like custom orthotics, physical therapy exercises, and sometimes even corticosteroid injections to really target that inflammation.
Okay, so that's where a junior podiatrist would really start to flex those diagnostic muscles, right?
Exactly. They'd be responsible for, taking the patient's history, doing a thorough physical exam, maybe even ordering some imaging, like an x-ray, just to rule out any other potential issues.
Mm.
And then, based on all of that information, they'd come up with a personalized treatment plan for that specific patient.
So it's not just like, oh, I memorized this from a textbook, here's the solution. It's about really using your knowledge and your judgment to tailor that treatment.
Yeah, it's very much a personalized approach.
I bet communication skills become even more important at that stage too, huh?
Oh, absolutely critical. You're interacting with patients more directly now. You're explaining what's going on, sometimes like kind of complex medical information, and you have to do it in a way that they can understand. You're addressing their concerns, building that trust and rapport so they feel comfortable and confident in the treatment plan you've developed together.
So it's not just about knowing the science, it's also about being a people person to some extent.
Exactly. Exactly. It's that human connection that can make a world of difference.
Now, the RoleCatcher guide also mentioned senior podiatrists taking on more leadership roles, even specializing in specific areas. So what are some of the paths that a podiatrist could take at that stage in their career?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, I think. You could focus on a specific demographic. Like you could become a pediatric podiatrist and work specifically with kids, or you could really hone in on a particular type of care, like sports podiatry, where you're helping athletes prevent and treat injuries related to their sport.
That's what I love about this career path. It's not just one size fits all, you know? There's actually room to really make it your own.
Exactly. And speaking of making it your own, some podiatrists even decide to open up their own private practice, which gives them, even more autonomy, more control over their work environment and the types of patients that they see.
There's that entrepreneurial spirit. You're not just treating feet, you're building a business.
That's right. And that actually ties into some of those skills we were talking about before, like the administration side of things, and even, believe it or not, marketing.
That's right. Speaking of skills, the guide also mentioned that psychology plays a surprisingly big role in podiatry, which wasn't something I would have necessarily thought about at first.
It makes sense when you think about it, though, right?
I guess so.
I mean, a podiatrist who really understands patient psychology is going to be much more effective at communicating with them, at building that trust like we were talking about, and ultimately helping them achieve the best possible outcome.
Absolutely, yeah. Can you give an example of how that might play out in a real-life situation?
Sure, absolutely. Let's say you have a patient who's, I don't know, maybe a little anxious about an upcoming procedure, or maybe they're hesitant to really follow through with the treatment plan for whatever reason. A podiatrist who's got those good people skills, that empathy, they can really pick up on those cues, address the patient's concerns and explain things in a way that really resonates with them emotionally, not just clinically.
Meeting them where they are.
Exactly.
This is fascinating stuff. But before we move on to the really exciting stuff, I'm curious to hear more about that next level, the principal podiatrist. What sets them apart?
So a principal podiatrist, that's like reaching the top of the field.
Yeah.
They might be leading a big clinic or a whole department in a hospital, or they might be shaping policies that affect podiatry as a whole. Or even, conducting research that really pushes the boundaries of what we know about foot health.
So not just treating patients, but really shaping the future of the field.
Exactly. They're at the forefront of everything. For example, they might be the ones developing brand new surgical techniques or researching how effective different treatment approaches are for, really complex cases. They're often the go-to experts, the ones that other podiatrists look up to.
That's incredible. It's amazing to see how far a podiatry career can go. We've covered so much ground today, from those first days as an entry-level podiatrist all the way up to these leadership roles. So for our listener who's, maybe daydreaming about a career in podiatry right now, what would you say are the biggest takeaways from all of this?
Well, I think the most important thing is just don't underestimate podiatry. It's so much more diverse and dynamic than people realize.
Yeah, it's definitely not just bunions and smelly feet, that's for sure.
Right. Like we were talking about, you could specialize in sports medicine. You could work with kids. You could even be that forensic podiatrist solving crimes with footprints. There's so many different paths you can take.
And it seems like no matter what path you choose, there's this real emphasis on always learning and growing, especially with all the new technologies and techniques emerging.
Oh, absolutely. It's a field that's constantly evolving. Podiatrists are always looking for ways to improve patient care, whether that's through incorporating something like 3D printing for those custom orthotics, or, just staying up to date on the latest research in, say, diabetic foot care.
It's really fascinating stuff, and it seems like a career where you get to combine that deep scientific knowledge with, that human touch.
Yeah. You said it. You're using your expertise to directly improve people's lives, to help them stay active and pain-free.
And that's got to feel pretty rewarding at the end of the day.
It really is. There's no better feeling than helping someone overcome a foot problem that's been holding them back
Mhm.
and seeing them get back to doing the things they love.
Speaking of those aha moments, and I know we touched on this earlier, but can you give our listener a little more of a visual, like paint us a picture of what a forensic podiatrist might actually do at a crime scene?
Okay, so picture this. There's been a crime, right? And the only clue left behind is a footprint. No other identifying information, just that one print. Now, a forensic podiatrist would come in and analyze that footprint in detail. They'd look at the size, the shape, even the wear patterns on the sole. And from that, they might be able to tell you the suspect's height, weight, even the way they walk. They can even tell if the person has any specific foot conditions. And that kind of information, that can be crucial for the investigators. It might help them narrow down the suspects or even connect that footprint to other crime scenes.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like those footprints are telling a whole story if you know how to read them.
Exactly. It's a whole other level of detective work.
Well, I think it's safe to say we've gone way beyond just feet today. It's been incredible to really dive deep into this world and see all the different opportunities podiatry offers. So a huge thank you to you, our expert, for taking the time to share your knowledge with us.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And for our listener, if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and you're thinking, hey, maybe podiatry is for me, which, let's be honest, after today, who wouldn't be? Make sure to check out RoleCatcher. Their career guides are honestly amazing, super in-depth. It's like having a career counselor right there on your computer. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us.